Today, we're going to be spending the next block of time exploring the world of MOOCs. MOOCs have been something that has been in our industry for quite some time, but we're privileged today to have two experts who are going to be diving into it, exploring what works, what doesn't, and how we can really harness their potential in the work that we do. We have two speakers. The first speaker who's going to be speaking to us today was unfortunately unable to be here in person, so we brought her in virtually. So you're going to be hearing her voice. She's going to be communicating to us through Skype. She'll be telling me when to advance her slides, and I will be conveying to her when we get towards the end the Q&A questions that she might have. And that person is going to be Hannah Gore. Let me tell you a little bit about Hannah, and then I will switch over the audio so you can hear her. So Hannah, after joining the Open University in 2005, Hannah has led projects on social media, student engagement, and has developed a wide range of open online courses and content on platforms such as OpenLearn, FutureLearn, iTunes U, YouTube, Amazon Kindle, Google Play, Facebook, and OERU, delivering content to a combined rate of circa 10 million visitors per annum. As an advocate for lifelong learning, Hannah has also researched her doctorate in learner engagement in MOOC learning design, whilst continuing her work in the same field. It gives me great pleasure to welcome her via virtual Skype to our session here today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over the audio here so we can hear Hannah, and we will kick off that session. Hannah, and I'll give you a message in Skype once we're ready to go.
Thank you.
Good? Okay.
Hello everybody, I'm so sorry I couldn't be there today. Unfortunately, I actually changed jobs and was recruited by a new company, and I'm actually in 3 days of meetings here in Paris right now. So I'm actually Skype calling you from our head offices here. So it's a little bit weird trying to present slides without seeing a room, so I'm going to do my best. My presentation today is about stopping the glorification of busy, about time management of learners that do massive open online courses, and the types of things they tell themselves and the types of things we tell ourselves about them. David, can I have the next slide, please? Perfect. So, as most of you hopefully know, the history of MOOCs very briefly. So I've been working personally in MOOCs now for the last 6 years. I've worked on several different platforms with MOOCs, and as they've grown over the years, the interest in them has also grown as well, because obviously there's several of you in the room today to talk about MOOCs. Considering that every single research paper normally starts with a brief history of MOOCs, I'm guessing most people inside the room actually know what one is. David, could I have the next slide? So my personal background, as David alluded to earlier, is prior to last week, I was a senior producer for MOOCs at the Open University, and I was in that role for nearly 6 years through various different job titles, and my role there was to produce MOOCs from idea conception all the way through to production, part of the learning design team, the production team, and then through to presentation and analysis of the end. So in my time at the Open University, I have been involved in the development of over 70 MOOCs. These have ranged in all different topics across our curriculum. They've also ranged in foreign language MOOCs as well. We've had over 200 presentations since we actually launched our first MOOC on the 18th of November 2013. It is literally tattooed into my memory. And since then, we've actually had over 1 million users using our MOOCs on the FutureLearn platform. We do actually syndicate that content, as Dave also alluded to in the pitch about me before I started talking. So we also take the content, syndicate it through to OpenLearn, which is an OER platform that the Open University owns outright with only OU content on it. We have stripped MOOCs for the parts. and we put the video content out onto YouTube, we've put content onto Amazon, we've put it onto Audioboom, iTunes U, etc. So the reach of our MOOCs over the last 6 years has actually been quite immense, and we've also had a full credit program to study. We were part of the first universities in the UK to develop content that could actually be used for credit, either at undergraduate level for our BA in Business Studies or for our triple accredited MBA. David, can I have the next slide, please? So the thing is, we spend a lot of money on MOOCs and we spend a lot of time on MOOCs, and the thing is, they kind of go wrong slightly. The drop-off rates are exceptionally high. It is something that has been recorded in a lot of presentations and research documents over the years, and it is circa 90%. It varies from platform to platform and from MOOC to MOOC, but on average we're looking at 90%. And most of us have spent academic careers trying to work out why, and during my time at the Open University, I was one of those people. David, can I have the next slide, please? So during my time at the Open University working in MOOCs, I spent more and more time thinking about why learners did not like MOOCs. Why didn't they continue them? Why didn't they complete them to the end? And so what happened was I actually decided to undertake a doctorate in researching this and gave it the rather sexily entitled Engagement of Learners Undertaking Massive Open Online Courses and the Impact of Design. And what this doctorate sent to achieve was to actually understand two questions, really. Why learners take MOOCs, which is not as straightforward as first thought, and also as well, how does this impact on learning design? So previously, a lot of MOOCs have been created normally based on very traditional forms of learning design. So, for example, at the Open University, we basically took our formal learning design methodology that we use for our courses, for qualifications, and we basically stripped it down. So what would take 2 years to produce a module took 20 to 24 weeks to produce a MOOC, and we went through the exact same process. And what we actually learned was that learners don't necessarily learn MOOCs in exactly the same way as learners do study courses. Through looking at a lot of data, I looked at 800,038 joiners, enrollers worth of data for my doctorate, of which 425,725. I'm learning all these numbers off the top of my head for my Viva. I looked at their learner details and how they actually studied the MOOC and the way they actually studied it and the way they went through it. And one of the things that we actually discovered was that they're not learning them in a linear journey. And that is a massive impact on learning design, because we believe that people would want to study things in a linear fashion. We've written it from start to finish. Why wouldn't they? Because that's what they have to do formally. And that's largely because we force them to do it formally, and informally they don't have to. If anyone is actually familiar with the FutureLearn platform, the way it is set up is that you have steps. So each week is broken down into steps, 15 to 20 or so, and learners see it in like a to-do list, and they can actually decide which steps they want to do. And what the data was actually showing us was that they were picking and choosing. They were creating a pick and mix society, and they were picking the steps that interested them the most. They were not going through it in a linear journey. So whilst the ski slope of MOOCs is quite famed for drop-off, it's not the same for engagement within MOOCs. It was something we previously assumed, that if they were dropping off at the same rate for MOOCs, in like the ski slope, it must be the same when it comes to doing steps and courses. And through looking at the data, what I actually discovered was that learners were actually studying steps in weeks later on in the course more than they were actually studying steps early on in the course. So they were chopping and changing, and they were moving about. So that makes a massive impact on learning design and how we actually perceive the course and how we actually perceive the learners doing the course. And so I wrote a little while ago a blog piece called MOOCs, A Recipe for Disaster. And I spent a little bit of time debating what to call it, because in case my career was on the line, I was expecting a P45 in the post, because they are a recipe for disaster, how they're actually currently designed. So it's a lot like a cookery book. And we believe MOOCs are like a cookery book, in that a cookery book is laid out in the order that you're going to eat the food, starters, mains, desserts, and every single page is beautifully set out. It's going to tell you how long it's going to take, what you need to do it, step-by-step instruction. There's a very nice picture, there's a celebrity chef, and yet none of us, I don't think, actually cook the cookery book in order. We chop, we change, we look at the bits that interest us, we pick out a recipe, we may follow it to heart the first time, we may remix it the second time, we completely make it up the third time, it becomes our signature dish. And this is how learners are studying MOOCs on the data that I've been looking at. They chop and change, they move about, and we have to design things that are more modular, weirdly, within, say, a 4-week MOOC than previously thought. So we can't think that learners are going to be like their formal counterparts, because they have to be when they're a formal student. They have to do everything, they have to read everything, they have to sit the exam, they have to pass the exam. Informal learners don't have to do that, they decide. So we need to make things better for them to help them decide. David, can I have the next slide, please? So during my time with my doctorate, what I did was I looked at 120,000 survey responses for why learners study MOOCs. And what is quite interesting was I decided to do a time management study. And so I contacted 2,118 students and asked them about themselves, to ask them about how they manage their time on MOOCs. So as you can see from the slide, and there was no great way of presenting this unless I presented, say, 6 slides on graphs. So they're half and half male to female. As you can see from the breakdown of age group, they're predominantly from the 36 age plus category. Most of them are residing in the UK. English is their first language, and they're also very qualified. And what's quite known about MOOCs is that quite a lot of people who take them are qualified. There's quite a bit of study about this, about how they're actually used for professional development instead of actually for formal study, and how we can actually change the mindset for formal study. And it was something, as I alluded to earlier on my earlier slide, that we started to embark in at the Open University, and how to integrate MOOCs into formal offerings. So as you can see, these types of learners here, they've probably got a full-time job, part-time job. They are British, they are speaking English as their first language, and they are educated people, half and half male and female. So as a survey data goes, that's actually quite a good breakdown to actually have. So I was quite pleased with that data. David, can I have the next slide, please? So I started to ask them questions to understand, why is it that they take MOOCs? And was it that the concept of MOOCs is foreign to them? Have you never taken one before? Is this really different? What is actually new to you here? And what we actually discovered was that 91.55% have enrolled in MOOCs before. These are not new to them. They understand them. They understand the format. They understand that they have to study online. They understand that it's an extracurricular activity. So MOOCs is not new to them in any way, shape or form, and they're regular users of MOOCs. So this is not the reason as to why they're dropping off at the rate of 90%. David, can I have the next slide, please? I asked them about their subjects, and did they actually find this quite interesting? And they come back with actually no, 93.97%, which is exceptionally high when we're talking about subjects. Were actually interested in the subject that they were taking. So the thing is, it's not that they were turned off even by the subjects available. There are thousands of MOOCs now available across several different platforms around the world. You get to study with people you've never studied before. You get to study with professors that you would never have met. So it's not that the subjects are dull. I mean, this was really important for the Open University to look at because we've created over 70 of these. I still use we in a present tense. I'm sure my new company will love that. But I'm still in the mindset slightly of the OU. It's only been a week and a half. But we at the OU were very keen to understand, had we got the wrong subject? You know, was there a subject that could have been better? Could we have selected something that would have been more appealing? And it turns out, no, actually, they were actually interested in the subjects that we were selecting for MOOCs. So it wasn't that either. David, can I have the next slide, please? So when you look at MOOCs, anything to do with MOOC drop-off, any paperwork, any research papers, any journal article, any newspaper article even, that talks about MOOCs, they talk about the biggest killer of MOOCs being time. Everybody uses time. And people say, I didn't have time, I was too busy, there wasn't enough time. And I've been to a lot of presentations and workshops about MOOCs. And in all the surveys that they've ever had, they've listed time as the number one reason. And so I started to think about this because everybody has the same amount of time in the day as everyone else. We all get 24 hours. 10% of people are using that 24 hours to do MOOCs, and 90% aren't. So then the question actually becomes, is time really the biggest killer? So what I did was, I started to ask them, next slide please, David, about their time that they spent on MOOCs. And so what happened was, most of them were saying, no, I'm actually spending quite a bit of time on MOOCs. I'm spending more than 4 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks. I mean, 10.52% were saying, I've spent 7 to 8 weeks. And that's a phenomenally long amount of time for MOOCs, especially in today, when most MOOCs are on average 4 to 6 weeks. They're saying that they're spending 3 to 4 hours, 5 to 6 hours, 7+ hours a week on MOOCs. But 18.27% said, I studied when I could. So I thought, that's quite an interesting piece of data. They're actually, there's 2,118 students are actually saying, no, we're quite dedicated. And the thing is, though, I thought, well, what are the odds of me getting the 10% out of these 2,000 odd students that actually complete MOOCs? Surely I've got some of the 90% in here. It can't be that dedicated. And luckily, next slide please, David, I was actually able to look at the data myself through FutureLearn. And computer says no. Computer actually says, no, they did not spend this amount of time. They're spending on average 1 to 2 hours. But previously, the majority were actually saying, no, I spend 4 weeks, I spend 5 to 6 weeks, I spend 7 to 8 weeks. A very small minority were saying that they were spending under an hour. They were saying, most of them were saying, I spend 3 to 4 hours, 5 to 6 hours, 7+ hours. Most of them were saying, I spend a lot of time. But the reality was, they were spending 1 to 2 weeks, and they were spending maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours. Sorry, I had to get in a slight vegan joke there, me being vegan myself, but they were telling absolute corporate lies. And so the question actually starts to become, are they fooling themselves here? Is it the same as, I'm going to start the diet on Monday, I'm going to join the gym on Monday, I'm going to lose 10 pounds this year? And it's that kind of mentality that maybe that they're getting themselves into. So I actually interviewed 12 of them out of blind curiosity, and I was talking to them about their MOOCs. I purposely selected students that had studied 2 years ago, so they should have finished by now. And I asked them, did you finish your MOOCs? And they said, no. And it took them a little while for them to actually say no. So I used negative language with them, and I said, so what made you drop out, quit, disengage? And they're like, no, we haven't quit, we haven't disengaged, we haven't dropped out. They hadn't seen themselves as quitting. They'd seen themselves as, I'll get back to it. And several of them said, oh no, I haven't finished, I'll get back to it. It had been 2 years. So they were actually saying to themselves, I'm not a failure, because I haven't finished it, but I'm going to get back to it. I'm going to start the gym on Monday, I'm going to start that diet on Monday. So they're using the same kind of mentality there with MOOCs as they are with everything else that they're thinking about doing. And the learners were just going, no, it's just temporarily on the shelf. I'm going to get back to it. So I asked them again, next slide please, David, would you prefer more time to study? So I never gave them time as an option before, until now. I'm saying, before I ask you the reasons why you didn't finish it, would you have preferred more time? And it was almost a 50% split. It was 52% to 48%. And that was actually quite an interesting moment, because it actually showed us how interested and how engaged they are with the MOOC. If they were given the option of more time, almost half of them wouldn't take it. And so previously our thoughts about MOOCs and them being free and everybody wants to use them and why wouldn't you, which is normally the conversation I have with most academics, is, well, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they study this course? It's free, it's made by me. And the truth of the matter is, most of them they want to spend more time. They're quite happy as they are. It's only an extra 2% that makes the difference to make the yes the very slight majority. Can I have the next slide, please, David? So I asked the question, if not, why not? And instead of giving them time as an option, which is standard if you look at any research data on MOOCs, any survey data, they normally say, why didn't you spend more time? If you didn't complete the MOOC, if not, why not? And time is always number one. Always number one in a survey option, and it drives me insane. And the reason is, every single option below that is actually a time-related activity. My personal life, my professional life, I didn't like the course, as the only one normally that doesn't involve time, but they're all time. So time is very easy as a scapegoat to say, I didn't have enough time, I just ran out of time. And it's not actually that. So if we flip the question and we say, if not, why not? Instead of saying, well, why did you, but why not? Why don't you want more time? Why wouldn't you want more time? And interestingly, just over 16% went, no, I've had enough time, thank you. I've done it, I've done what I need. Because next to it was, I got what I wanted. My understanding was achieved. So this is back to that pick and mix mentality. For example, our course, Introduction to Cybersecurity, one of the most popular sections of the entire course is password security. So during the Talk hack scandal that happened a couple of years ago, we were mid-presentation on cybersecurity. We were 6 weeks into an 8-week MOOC. And on that 6th week, the Talk hack scandal hit the news and a lot of accounts were hacked and people were worried about password safety. And on week 6 of our MOOC, 2 weeks from the end, we had a 28.59% increase in enrollments. People were Googling, oh my God, how do I protect myself? What do I need to do? I need to change my password. I don't know what's strong. And our course popped up and they came in and they took the bit on password security, understood it, and walked away. So their understanding achieved doesn't necessarily mean that they've understood the entire course. They've understood the bit of the course that interested them in the first place. Because that is a counter to why they found study boring. They took the bit they wanted. If they had to do the whole thing, it would be boring. So also as well, they used family commitments and work, which is the personal professional problem. And we expected these to be quite high, and they were. Alarm bells inside my head that I'll talk about in a little bit. But lack motivation came out actually quite low. Studying boring came out quite low. Embarrassed, minuscule. And what was quite interesting is, came out third highest, did the planned amount. And so, did the planned amount, we know from the data, shows that they didn't do the planned amount. So they're still at this point saying, no, I did exactly what I was going to do. I understood it, I had enough time, and life gets in the way. So from this slide, they're actually saying, no, other things are actually more important than this MOOC. And that says a lot about the positioning of MOOCs and how we can position them better. Can I have the next slide, please, David? So in designing better MOOCs, the question then that we have to ask is, well, what do you like and what don't you like? And there's a lot to do in learning design about, they're saying, no, people want quizzes, they want interactive, they want learning activities, they want to chat amongst themselves. And actually, our learners found videos and articles more appealing to them. And when I looked at the data of the 425,725 learners, it actually turned out that's exactly the same for them as well as for the 2,118 learners. They really like videos and articles. And it's something that they come to time and time and time again. They're not as keen on actually being as interactive as we first thought they were. And they hate even more unenjoyable activities, peer assessment and peer review. What we discovered in putting peer assessment and peer review courses, they're pedagogically a really great tool to help learners. It's something that they hate. We even created rubrics for them and examples for them in how to peer assess and peer review. And what we actually discovered was they want War and Peace back, but they're not prepared to give it. So they write, oh, that was okay, you did good there, send. But what they want back is a full-fledged argument and feedback. And then they're actually annoyed if they get anything less along the lines of what they actually did themselves. And so we actually found that learners just want to absorb. They don't necessarily want to interact as we first thought that they did. Can I have the next slide, please, David? So I asked them, well, what is it that you actually really want out of these courses? And they want to learn more about a subject they're already interested in. And that was the overwhelming response, more than the course is free. So they're just touching on subjects they already know. They just want to have that little bit more. They just want to be able to understand something more. Third came that they wish to learn more about a subject they have no or limited knowledge in. So it wasn't as important. Expanding their knowledge in new domains was not as important as expanding their knowledge in existing domains. And they weren't so keen on actually learning with others. And linked to professional development came really low at 17.99%. And we spend a lot of time and a lot of research looking at how we can make courses linked to professional development, believing that these learners that have degrees, that have doctorates, that have masters, want to link to professional development. And they're actually saying, no, I just actually want to learn more about what I already know. Can I have the next slide, please, David? So I asked them, what don't you want? And it turns out what they don't want is a link to professional development. 52.15% said, no, it's okay, I'm quite happy with learning just stuff that I quite like learning about, you know. So some of our most popular courses are Start Writing Fiction. That came out, coincided with 50 Shades of Grey coming out, and believe me, that became a very popular course overnight. People wanted to be the next 50 Shades of Grey. They'd seen how much money it made. And they actually wanted to develop there. We do courses on moons, on solar systems, on musical scores, and they perform just as well as professional development courses. We actually found out, no, they're not that keen on actually learning with others. They're quite happy just digesting amongst themselves, and they want short courses. And weirdly, though, they're actually attracted to the idea of being taught by a top professor, for the sex appeal of, say, a Harvard professor or a Stanford professor, they don't actually want that much contact with them. They actually want a course that's around 4 to 7 weeks, 6 weeks maximum, and they want to learn on their own. And that helped us change our mindset quite a lot as to what it is that they actually want. Can I have the next slide, please, David? So there has to be a balance. And it's a very hard thing to achieve, especially when you're talking about populations that are in the tens of thousands. And the problem is that they see this course and it's really great, it's really exciting, and it's delivered by a really amazing professor, and then they start to put on the scales on the other side all the things that they want to do instead of doing the MOOC. And it could be, I want to read my kids a bedtime story. I've got stuff to do at work tonight. I just want to watch this episode of EastEnders. And the problem is that because the MOOC is almost so flippant to them, it's so available, I can get it at any time, I can sign up for the next presentation, I'll start the gym on Monday, that they'll do anything else but. They've got that exact same mindset as people who make New Year's resolutions and are at the gym and doing the diet and the clean eating on the 1st of January to the ones that are there on the 31st of December. So in making MOOCs more engaging, yes, there's a lot we can do about learning design, but there's also something to be said about how we position the MOOC and how we make that MOOC integral into their daily life. And what we actually did with one of our MOOCs was we actually created it. It's called Forensic Psychology Witness Investigation. There's a book chapter coming out on this soon with myself and my colleague, Professor Graham Pike. And we actually created a MOOC that went against the rules of MOOCs. And it's serialised week by week, weekly release. So going back to Dickensian times when they would do Christmas Carol every single week. And so we actually created a MOOC that released every single week that was a crime and they had to solve it. And we actually discovered that learners were more likely to complete that MOOC as its full form than when we actually put it on full release on OpenLearn, because we can't do weekly release on OpenLearn. So actually, in the modern day Netflix binging culture that we now live in, they were actually quite excited about the fact that they couldn't move on. It gave them a reason to come back next week. But that only works on certain narratives, so you have to be really careful. In making MOOCs more engaging, it isn't a case of one size fits all. It's a case of finding out exactly what that course pedagogically could deliver and then developing it. Can I have the next slide, please, David? So, wrapping it all up, so I looked at for my doctorate 76 presentations of 19 weeks over a 3-year period. And my doctorate submission went in last week, in between leaving jobs and starting new jobs. And it's actually the largest single source data set to come out about MOOC analysis of youth and learning design. But what was actually quite interesting was that learners are more likely to select subjects, which is kind of important considering this conference that I'm at, for professional development and educational and technology advancement. Those were the ones that they wanted to have for professional development. Those were the ones that they were actually interested in and kept in at a higher rate. So one that had to do with the past is actually quite interesting, but one to do with technological advancement is actually more interesting. The OU is set to release 4 new MOOCs. I started them just a couple of months before I left, to do with STEM technology, to test this theory. And what we actually discovered was that they actually preferred non-communication sets, articles, videos, etc., more than communication sets. They don't want to actually weirdly talk to each other. There's a much smaller subset that wants to do that. Can I have the next slide, please, David? So what I actually did was I took all the steps from the 76 MOOCs and I cross-referenced each of the presentations. So, for example, I looked at 8 presentations of Introduction to Cybersecurity, and I looked at the steps that were most popular for comments and for likes, and I cross-referenced them across 8 presentations. So where, for example, step 4.1 appeared all 8 times, I singled it out. If it appeared in comments and likes, I singled it out again. And what actually happened was, out of just over 1,500 steps, 62, which is a very small amount, came back as super steps. And these super steps are the most engaged with steps, regardless of presentation, what the platform was doing, and the population of learners. These were MOOC on MOOC on MOOC considered engaging. And what was quite interesting about this was that of the 62 super steps, 25 of them had questions in the title. So going back to how FutureLearn actually works with the to-do list is that they see the step title and then they click on the step. So obviously they're not actually in the step until they actually click on it. What we actually discovered was a new element to learning design is clickbait. So when designing MOOCs and making them more engaging, that you should actually create stuff that has that clickbait element that wants to draw them in, and actually becomes a new element of learning design. Next slide, please, David. You'll be happy to know that I'm coming to the end of my presentation. David's just given me my warning via Skype chat. Does anyone have any questions in the room at all?
I can relay the question if anyone has a question that they would like to give her. Hannah, I just plugged in my headset so I can relay the question to you, and then I'll go back. Yes, we have a question right up in here.
So if you know that people don't think they failed, they haven't completed or they're taking a long break, how do we design MOOCs differently, or how do we reset the expectation for completion rates or what we're learning out of that course?
Okay, so if we have this issues with people doing completion, how do we reset the expectations of what it means to participate in a MOOC? Am I summarizing that well? Again, I'm going to give you 1 second before you respond, Hannah, so we can get your audio back.
Yes, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes. So the question, just to repeat it, was, oh, I'm sorry, we're good?
Leave the headset in.
Leave the headset in, and we're good here. All right. So you got it. All right, then. So, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question for me one more time? Because I got just totally distracted.
If she knows that a lot of people don't complete or have a long break and they think they're still in the MOOC, how do we reset the expectation of what successful participation or completion means?
Okay, so based on a lot of the stuff that you've said so far, how do you reset the expectation of what success within a MOOC means? Wait, Hannah, give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to switch it, and then you can respond.
Okay. So the biggest problem that we have with MOOCs is how they're actually defined as successful in the first place. So everyone became obsessed with completion data only when Coursera was actually launched. Before then, if you look at any research data, they're actually talking about the pedagogy and the use. They're not actually talking about percentages of completion. And the only reason why people talk about percentages of completion was because Coursera actually assigned them to commercial work, people buying certificates, people buying subscriptions. If we, for example, look at the rest of OER, if we look at, for example, what we did at the Open University with iTunes U, or Amazon, or YouTube, downloading books, nobody actually questions, did anyone actually get to the end of that iBook? Did anyone actually get to the end of that iTunes podcast? Did everybody get to the end of that YouTube video? And so what we need to understand is that, and my thesis heavily pins on this, is successful engagement with a MOOC is not defined by the percentage that complete it. So it's about how they engaged with the MOOC and how they felt walking away from it. And that's quite hard to quantify in some ways, but I don't think that being solely obsessed with the end of the completion data is the way to go. David just told me we have time for this one question because I talk too much. Hopefully he's got up my final slide. I am available if anyone wants to ping me, Twitter, happy to chat publicly via Twitter, via DM, via email on this. But yes, any questions, please give me a shout and I will respond back, I promise.
Hannah, I do have your closing slide up, so we will have anyone who has additional questions to reach out to you directly. I also wanted to put the mic in one more time. I know it's a little challenging for you to do this into a vacuum, so if I can just ask everyone in the room if you can just show your appreciation for Hannah doing this for you right now so she can hear you. Hannah, thank you very much for going through this and sharing what you shared with us here today.
Thank you very much.
Take care now. All right. And with that, we will move on to our next session for the program. So now we have another perspective coming up on MOOCs. Good, thank you.
May close this. Yes.
Excellent. So our next speaker is Sabine Gori. Sabine brings over 16 years of marketing and learning experience to the session she's going to share with us here today. Her background enables her to drive initiatives around better communication and collaboration across all divisions of Credit Suisse globally. She is currently leading the enablement of the organization's learning experts, helping them to develop blended learning programs and to deliver campaign-based learning to create profound learning experiences for the Credit Suisse workforce. Please welcome Sabine Gori to our stage.
Have to turn, you can hear me. Wow, that's great. So we go switch from the university to an organization, and I'm very much pleased to talk about this topic. So I'm going to take you on a journey from why and how we started to think about online learning communities and how they became corporate MOOCs. And I'm not talking about massive as Hannah has, like with over 100,000 of participants. I'm really talking about MOOCs in an organization where the average is around 150. So if I'm not really giving all the answers you might have to these questions, there will be, again, an address at the end, like for Hannah. So to begin with, yesterday there were a lot of talk about the learning culture of our organizations. I move away from and there was a session with Neil Page, and he asked the audience, have you considered what the learning culture is in your organization? And it was like a task, and I'm not sure if someone was in this session, and if yes, if you did your homework, because I reconsidered what the learning culture is at Credit Suisse. And just to give you a quick view on and background on the organization, Credit Suisse is the second largest financial institute in Switzerland. We have around 48,000 employees in 50 countries and in 150 nationalities. And it's a very conservative company, but nevertheless, we have been amongst the first movers in the industry when it came to e-learning and new learning technologies. So today, if you look at our training delivery, it's around 60% in classroom training and 40% in e-learning. Sounds maybe familiar to you. And if you look at e-learning, it's mainly compliance training. So the question is now, is this organization ready for a next step? And is the culture ready for a next step? If we ask our people, especially in Switzerland, they will prefer classroom training, because this is kind of award and incentive. So they very much like to network face-to-face. If you talk about online learning, they will start, to look at you and say, I'm not really on Facebook. I'm not really the person, Twittering. It's not my type of thing. So this is one of the challenges we faced with. Another challenge we really were facing, and I'm sure if I would ask you, you would be very familiar with that, is the globalization and the digitalization. The next one was a constant cost and headcount reduction. So we were constantly confronted with less budget and with more cost and time effectiveness demand for training. So we had to come up with a new idea. We also considered the 80-20-10, 70-20-10, not good in counting, it's after lunch, model, and realized that we're really just focusing on the 10%. And the question was, how can we as an organization really bring the formal and the informal training to our people and enable them to learn from each other and with each other in a collaborative way. My English is Swiss, so hope you understand me. So this was the challenge, and this was when we started to think about delivering a concept of online learning communities. And we were really, really happy to have 4 pilot projects. And we thought that they're going to be so successful because everything was in place. There were, people eager to start networking online, to continue to have a network, to exchange things. And what do you think? How successful have we been? Any guess? We had 4 major pilot projects. What do you think? 4 successful? Who is for 3? Thank you, Lauren. 2? 1? Right. So yes, we failed. But the reasons why we failed were quite obviously when we looked into the different projects. One of the major projects, and we heard this from Hannah as well, was time and effort, but not from the part of the learner. It was more of the part of the learning experts, the learning community managers. They have underestimated the time they need to make a community successful, taking the time to think about the objectives and the values of a community and what they have to, arrange and do differently than in a face-to-face presentation or training. And then the 99-1 rule proved to be true, which means that 90% of the participants, they were just reading, 9% were maybe liking and commenting, and 1% was really creating content and starting to share. And this led to a great frustration for the line managers because they expected to have a successful product at the end, and especially for the learning community manager because they thought it's going to be much more traffic. People were waiting for it, right? So this was the initial situation. They were waiting for it. They were asking for it. So why don't they, tell us that they like it, and why don't they start now to network and to share content? And then the last point was really the understanding of, the lack of understanding that static internet web pages are completely different than a social environment. So that there has to be engagement, they have something, of value to go there, and there has to be activity. So they were used to have their PowerPoint slides up there, so there are resources, and they were used that they just present and then it's done. So the next step for us was to avoid further empty, abandoned learning communities. We had to think about some rules. And what we then came up is, and again, I'm sure this is nothing new, content is king. There has to be a reason why you go to a learning community, because in organizations, there is so much knowledge available in different kinds, like SharePoints, intranet pages, you name it, there is so much there. So why is there a reason that I go there? One factor is we have no time, right? We just heard this. There is no time to go there. So you have to make it really relevant to the people, and you have to present the content in a way that it's a pleasure to read and that it's attractive. So you can't really just post all your articles and PowerPoints and whatever you have used for classroom trainings up there and hope that the community will be happy with that. And next thing, and this was really clear from the very beginning, you have to have roles and responsibilities in place. So you have to have learning community manager, you have to have subject matter experts that are highly committed and highly engaged to make this happen and make this successful. So we always say it's good to have like at least 1 to 2 learning community manager who really are monitoring the community, make sure that everything is in place, and that you have subject matter experts out of the business really delivering content which is of value and that they can answer the questions the community might have. So, and again, make it relevant. This was really key. But to be very honest, we still have not a recipe, so I can't offer you the recipe. And we were just thinking about maybe some ingredients which will help you, and we figured out that this helped us. So if you look at the ingredients, first thing is the host. It's like if you have a party or you go to a fancy restaurant, someone has to welcome you, show you the table, explain you something, of the venue, maybe let you meet people, introduce you to what you can expect here, give you kind of the menu. And then the next thing is really the curation. Again, you can't just put things there, videos and articles without really curating it and look if it's tailored to this target group. And is it explicitly here, or is there other places they could go and find the same content? So it's really key that you know your target group, that you know the objectives of this community. There are learning goals as well. It's the same as you have in a face-to-face. So how are you going to really perceive them? And then the encouragement. It's hard work. It's really hard work to make a community run. And this is like really always thinking about activities. It's like, I always say, if you see a restaurant which is empty and you see a restaurant next door which is crowded, where would you go? You go to the crowded one because you think it's the better one. There is something happening. And it's the same thing in a community. And then the promotion, you have to start to talk about it. Again, there's so much out there. Our people at Credit Suisse, they're just overwhelmed with all the information they get daily, and they really have a hard work to figure out what is really key for me and what's not. So you have to promote the community and also tell them why it's important to go and link from wherever you have, like e-learnings. If you have a learning management system, you have to link to the community. It should be the place where they go for this specific learning topic. So yeah, from there, and this is, I told you I'd take you on a journey, we thought we could do more. So we had these learning communities, but again, to be honest, I was expecting that our learning experts were really eager to have these learning communities. They weren't. So we thought, okay, we have to do more. And the next step for us was clear. We have to enable our speakers, our learning experts, our L&D community, that they understand what's the power of social learning, communities, and corporate MOOCs. So what we then said is it's really important that we establish a learning experience they can go through and that they really feel what it is, what social really can bring them. So the journey of corporate MOOCs started, and we had two enablers, I call them so, for our L&D population. And we run two corporate MOOCs. One was called Discover Social Learning. It was a 6-week program with 6 topics. We had 5 community managers and SMEs. It was one learning community, online community. This was the place. This was kind of virtual classroom they have to come to find all the information and all the dates, you know, the events and everything. So all the information was sitting on this community. And to make them engaged, they had to do some assignments. It's not like in a university, it's like just open and you come and go as you want. It's an organization, we have some goals. So we really wanted them to attract to the community, and we asked them every week to deliver 2 assignments, interactions. So this could have been just read Jane Hart's now it's 200 learning tools, and write into a team discussion what your top 10 learning tools are. And my colleague Helen, she was taking part, she's just smiling, she was taking part because there something really nice happened. She posed, and I remember this very good, that she's using Evernote, and this was like 5 years ago. No one knew really what Evernote is, and they couldn't figure out of the elephant what this is used for. So they started to ask online in the team discussion, what is Evernote, what you're using it for? So what Helen did, and she is like me in Zurich, she said, you know what, if you're interested in seeing it and what I can do it, we will meet on Thursday afternoon in our cafeteria and I will show you. And this was the best thing, because this was really proof that social learning happens online, but also still face-to-face. So we had live events, we had the structure, and I'll show you on the next slide, which was for every week the same, because you have to make them feel comfortable and you have to have low barriers so that they don't struggle with the tool, that they just don't come back because it's too complicated to find the content. So we have live events. We always recorded the live events and made sure that they were available as replay within 2 hours, so that doesn't matter where you are on this world, you had the access and you could learn at your own pace. And then just some numbers of visitors, and this proved also the 99.1 rule. We had so much traffic on this community, but the interaction took some time that it really then launched. To give you the structure of the learning architecture, we really had per week 1 topic, making sure that they understood what is social media, what has social media to do with social learning, what tools are available within Credit Suisse that they could use to really start to use learning communities for their population. So they had clearly objectives for each week. We started each week with the weekly introduction. We had it twice, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, to make sure that the colleagues in APAC and Americas had the opportunity to kick off the week the same way. We had the replays, we had the assignments, and then we offered various resources. So over the week time, the resources were more and more. So we started with a couple of them, and then we gave more. So for those who wanted really to go into the detail of this topic, they had enough. And they were like TED Talks, YouTube videos, whatever you found. So and this is very important, we didn't build something specific for this community. We used all the resources that were available in the World Wide Web. And we had deep discussions, and we had always a weekly summary summarizing what were the activities, what were the most comments. If there is an open question, we took it back to the community, asked for them to answer it, and so on. So this was the first enabler. It was, as I said, like 5 years ago, and guess what? Have you been successful since then? What do you think? Who thinks that we were successful and everyone wanted to have a learning community? Good. Who thinks, no way, they're still struggling? Yeah, it's more the second part. And the reason why was clearly that the time issue. People told us, look, it's nice to have a learning community. I see that. And they started to add it on. They have a classroom training, and they just, give me a learning community and add it on because they want to network now, and this will happen. And when you told them, no, it's not going to happen, you have to have a concept, they struggled because of time. So what we did 2 years ago, we came with a second enabler. It was called Blended Learning 2.0. And it had a little bit different approach. It was not massive at all. We restricted it to 20 learning experts. And they had to bring their own project where they were going to work on from the very beginning to the end, so that they could say, there is a business need, and I have a business case, and now I have a result. So, and you have heard that Hannah said, I think people don't like MOOCs that are longer than 7 weeks. We made it 8 weeks. We challenged our people. I mean, come on, they are learning experts. They should be interested in what they do. So we did the 8 weeks with the summer break so that they had enough time to develop their own program. Again, they had assignments to fulfill. They had coaching weeks. And the completion rate this time was 55%. The first time we had 48, which is still very good. And I think if you compare it to open universities, this is really a good result for an organization. The travel plan looked a little bit similar from the architecture as you have seen before. You had per week modules. This travel plan was on the webpage, on the community, so that you knew exactly what's going to happen during the week, what was expected from you. And we also made very clear how much time you will need to spend on the learning community, learning, and we said clearly, please make time in your agendas, because what we also heard several times over the last couple of days is people have to learn again. They really struggle when they have to organize their own learning and find time slots, especially because this learning happened during working hours. It was not that you've spare time, so you were working. There were colleagues maybe just, sending you an email, approaching you at your table, asking you questions. So you were distracted very easily. So we had really make sure that they were clear of what we expected from them, but also what they could expect from the training. The approach here was clearly to show them and to prove that classroom training and virtual training can be quite the same. So what we did with them is really, we made them feel how it could look like. So we had, and I give you here some impressions. You see the learning community. We gave them per week an overview with the facilitator video, telling them what they can expect, giving them kind of insights into the topic already, and telling them what events are coming up to, so that they were clear about the travel plan. They had always the events with the link to the Outlook calendar. They had the assignments clearly defined with due dates and links they would need to fulfill the assignments. They had team discussions, which were shown there as well. So it was all in a place and made very simple to approach. We showed them that you can do easily icebreaker. I'm sure you know the icebreaker exercises when you ask people, talk to your neighbors, talk about issues, or make a line, who is the longest in an organization, who the shortest. We did the same thing. So we asked them, take a picture of your shoes, upload it, and talk about your shoes. And it was so funny, because that first time, you know, you really get to know the people. So we had one lady in APAC, she had a cupboard full of shoes, you can't believe, same type, all colors. There was a man in the US, he had his trainers on, he was just, you know, starting to train for a marathon. So he started to tell people about the marathon because they were asking. So you could see that you also can have kind of this, you know, starting to have this empathy and the exchange on a community. What we also had were I told you the facilitator videos. We had Stefan the Builder. Stefan the Builder, his role was to build the bridge between the off and the online world. So he then took examples of, for instance, the icebreaker and said you could do icebreaker online like this and you could do it offline like this. He took examples like flipped classroom. You can do flipped classroom online, give the lecture in videos, ask people then to write about their thoughts and ideas in the community. You can do the same thing in an offline training and in an online training. So what we really wanted to avoid is that, you know, that they felt kind of we're going to take away the classroom training, because we have speakers, they're really keen about their role. So we just wanted to show, hey, there is more than just face-to-face. And we had a weekly summary block, really summarizing again the highlights of the whole week and to make sure that everyone was able to learn at their own pace. They had really one big project, so they were driven through the whole 8 weeks in learning how to come up with the concept for a program, how they do a storyboard, how they do a learning travel plan, what the tools are they could use for. They had the chance to use them, so they had to present themselves. There were peer-to-peer sessions, we had coaching sessions, and we were quite successful, I would say, with the result. But still, I think there is a long way to go. There are still so many voices saying, yes, this is the future. See the point, I think it's a great thing to do, but, and then you have all the reasons why you shouldn't do this. I can be very persistent, so this is my goal over the next couple of months. And there are more stops on our journey, and what we're going to do is really, again, go back to our learners and really try to understand their needs again, to make sure that we're still on the same and on the right track. So we are going to ask them again, and this is something which came out of one of our pulse check, and we run a couple of years back, and we plan one this year. And it's clearly that people are looking for learning at the moment of need, highly relevant, best on mobile devices, and collaborative learning. So this is everything what you also could tick off when you do a MOOC, but this is a way we want to go a step further. And then the next thing is really, and how do we make this learning stick? So this is time we're going to spend now in the next couple of weeks to make really sure that this training is sustainable, that it's not just forgetting curve after like 24 hours. I think MOOC is already a good start because you have the duration of 3 to maybe 6 weeks. You really confront people with the topic and they're going to interact with this topic, but still there is more to do. We're looking into micro-learning things, which are items you easily can use in learning communities, in MOOCs. And we're really looking into campaign-based learning. This is going to be the next step. So, as I just said, this is where we go. I'm sure that I share a lot of these ideas with you, and we heard a lot of here, so maybe I will be able to tell you next time a little bit more about that. And with that, thank you for your time, and I think we should be good, right?
Questions?
if you have a question, would be your time.
First, is it on?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. First, thanks for that very insightful presentation. I would like to understand if you were back 5 years ago, would you do it again?
Yes.
Or would you do something completely different?
I think it was really important for us to fail, because this was the only way to really, learn from this and try to make it better. And this is still what we do. We try to do it better from each time. So we run several online trainings or corporate MOOCs, and each time you just notice that you can do it. You could do it same every time. It's different with the cohort you have in your community. So yes, I would start there again and be engaged. I think you have really to have this feeling that this is going to work, and then the chance is good.
Hi, thank you. That was great. I have two questions, actually. The first one is in terms of return of investment. Do you think this is more expensive or cheaper than traditional e-learning where you don't need to support an e-learning community and maybe run sessions twice per day? You just put the e-learning there and they consume it when they have the time. And the second one is if maybe some tips. How do you sell a MOOC to your senior management? Because everyone says that completion rate is bad, so how do you sell it to them?
Good questions. So the question of ROI is always coming, and it's really difficult. When we started, we said, yeah, it's much, much cheaper than, a classroom training. You don't need a menu, you don't need food, you don't need drinks. But to be very honest, it takes time. So this is not to be underestimated. But when you build a MOOC in a way that you can reuse it, like what we do, you run different cohorts. I think you have a story to tell. If you take one we had for line managers, a MOOC which was over 3 weeks, it was lead change, and this was built on an original half-day classroom training. So imagine people had to come 2-hour training place, they were trained for half day, and then they commuted back. So basically a day was lost for like 4-hour training. So we built this 3-week cohort, and we could train in the same time much more people. So every cohort, and we had 5 so far, had over 100 participants. If you look at the classroom training, you had 20. What we know for a fact is that they were much more engaged with the topic because they stayed in the kind of alumni community we have built afterwards. It's called Think Change. It's a community that really is just there to, if you're interested in change, you will find resources, you will find people. So we see that they stay, and are actively on this community. So I think this is the story you can tell. And we're trying to look into more detail. So, and this is also with Helen's team, we're really trying to figure out what is the knowledge before they start versus to what is the knowledge afterwards, and then try to compare it with classroom training. But it's very, very difficult. How do we set it up? Get them on board. So the very first one we had our CLO on board. So we had him in a video message, not about welcoming, no talking head, but he was talking about his learning experience and why he thinks that communities could be really a value to the organization. And he appeared on a chat once. And just that he was there once made such a big effort, had such a big impact, because people really saw that he is engaged, that he's supportive, and then again, this is the learning culture, right? So he is okay with them spending time on a community. So get them on board. It's difficult, but you need to have them on board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're hitting the end of our time, so if anyone has any additional questions, I'm sure Sabine will be around. You can ask her any additional questions.
Yeah.
I want to, first off, thank you very much for everything you
Thank you.